Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, welcome to our webinar today, Dispute Resolution Options in Early Intervention and Early Childhood Special Education. I know this one is for our professionals, so welcome. My name is Rhonda Moore, and I am a parent mentor for the Center for Exceptional Families. And our special guest today is Tiffany Kell. She is the Mediation Program Coordinator with the William H. Bowen School of Law Legal Clinic. She is responsible for implementation, contract negotiation, and promotion of the grant-funded mediation program serving Arkansas. Through these various projects, she works closely with the mediation clinic students through experiential learning opportunities. With all that being said, I will turn it over to Tiffany.
Hi, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I wish I could see all your faces, so I'm going to miss that. Throughout this, I think you can chime in through chat or raise your hands if you have any questions. I'm going to be going at rocket speed, but I will leave some room at the end or throughout. I'm fine. I'm very flexible for any questions that you might have, or if we need to dive deeper into something, just let me know. But I'm excited to be here. So I'm going to do a screen share. Oh, I need to be able to screen share. So I think you have to put me as a host, Rhonda, if you're still there.
Yes, let me see.
Okay.
Or Katie may have to do that, but I think.
Okay.
Okay, see, does that do it?
Let me check. That did it.
Hey.
Look how awesome we are. Okay, here we go. I hope it goes. There we go. So we'll kick it off talking about early intervention and special education mediation projects. Like Rhonda already said, I'm housed at the law school. And we are actually a third party. We're the only law school in the nation to handle mediations or facilitated IEPs or IFSPs. So it's pretty cool. If you've been a part of this or you ask or request, you might have a couple of law students in there watching because they are actually observing a mediator facilitator and they're learning how to do this as part of their credit. So I think it helps with just keeping the program in line, the fidelity of the program, and so forth. Also, the mediators and facilitators get a ton of feedback, which always makes us better. So we'll just jump right in. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about it, how it began, and I know you guys are experts in this, but it's always good to remind us that it started with the reauthorization of the IDEA. So it was the formal introduction of mediation, and it's mandated to have that available to every state under federal law for both parts B and C. So mediation is something that has to be available. And we'll talk a little bit more about facilitation. It's an add-on, and we'll do that a little later. That's something Arkansas has taken upon itself. After reading due process hearing opinions, which they're available on the ADE website, and I don't know if they're available through First Connections. Maybe Raven can let us know if you have any. I was like, it never happens that you guys, she's shaking her head no. So there's quite a few, unfortunately, on the ADE. If you ever want to read the decisions, I think it's helpful to kind of see how hearing officers made their decisions and kind of follow that logic. But they're available. And you can kind of see what's going on. And I lost my train of thought in that situation, but we'll just go through exactly what this looks like for you guys and how it applies. Via grant from the Arkansas Department of Human Services, Division of Developmental Disability Services, and the Arkansas Department of Education is how we work. So there's no cost to teachers, providers, or parents, which is fantastic. So it's really an opportunity to collaborate and come to an agreement without it going to a hearing. And we'll talk about why you want to try to do that, if at all possible. So procedural safeguards, the most important part of all of this, because I think it's very, very important for us to explain to parents their rights, because it is so confusing. I mean, I know you guys are great about giving the parents' rights out, and it's that big book that nobody really reads. And even I look through it, and you have to get your readers out and kind of go through and try to understand it. But each state's early intervention program, Part C for infants and toddlers, and Part B for 3 to 5, and then all the way up through 12th grade. The book explains how so that parents know their rights, communicate their child's strengths and needs to advocate for their child, and help their child develop and learn. The professionals must know how to explain these rights to parents so that they can advocate for their child and family. And just, I feel like I'm probably preaching to the choir here because you guys have done this a time or two. It takes a few times to explain this. To me, it's like going to a doctor, right? And you're hearing news for the first time, and you hear the news like you have high blood pressure. And I'm just being, we could talk about COVID right now, whatever it is. After that, you hear wah, 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 wah. You can't really understand what they're talking about. You need time to go back and breathe and think and engage your frontal lobe. So one way to do that when you're talking to parents and explaining right is to ask questions. So pause and say, so what does that mean to you? You know what I mean? Different things like that. And you can hear their response and kind of gauge their understanding. But it is critical so that they know exactly how to approach this. That will help them from infancy all the way through, because if there's nothing else we know that things work really well in early intervention. And then it gets really, really confusing and sometimes some really poor outcomes from kindergarten on. So the more we can enable parents to understand how to best advocate with their children and for their children, it's just better off in the long run altogether, because they'll have a lot of work later on. Okay, due process is a requirement that legal matters be resolved according to principle. Sorry, my phone's buzzing over here. I'm going to turn it off. It's resolution options, and this definition only applies to special education. I just want to be really clear because it has a whole different meaning when we're talking about a legal definition. But parents have options about how they can settle a disagreement about their child's early intervention or special education needs. We need to be real clear when we're explaining to them that all of these processes that we're going to discuss, none of them hinder their right to due process hearing. All right, so parents must be provided clear information about their options before any action that might impact their child's eligibility, services, or placement, their service setting, eligibility determination, or IFSP IEP meetings, okay, at all those times. I love this graphic. Raven Hawkins put it up there. She helped me create this PowerPoint. And I like graphics because visually, I'm a visual learner. It makes it easier to understand. But you can see due process is in the middle. It's the big, heavy head honcho. And we'll talk about why it is so heavy, because it's not only taxing mentally, physically, financially, it takes its toll on everyone involved. But and I've said it before when we were talking to parents, I'll say it again and again, there is a place for litigation. That's why it's available. But in this situation, in special education, as in many situations, but this one, I think particularly because we're talking about relationships long-term for kids, for the benefit of children, there are other avenues that you're going to want to try to explore before or at the same time. But facilitation is early on, right? So that's part of that communication. That's when you start using facilitation. Mediation is when it's gotten a little bit tougher. It's probably when people reach an impasse. There's state complaints, which play a part in all of this. In my experience, we'll go into a little more when I have seen them. In part B, it's usually surrounding systemic issues. And I've said this before, when the new dyslexia law went into play, we had some systemic issues about the implementation. So there were quite a few state complaints that came through. And it's used different in Part C than Part B, and they're trying to tweak it in Part B a little more. And we'll talk about that, how we can help that process. But that gives you a great visual before we dive in. All right, so we're talking about who can request these things. A state complaint, it's any organization or individual, which is very different than due process hearing, where it has to be the parent or the public agency or the child if they're 18 years or older. Right? And you'll see the same thing with an FIEP. So you'll see the public agency, the child. And the reason why I think state complaint is interesting is it can be someone involved in just anyone who knows about that, right? Because if you think about what a state complaint's about, if you think about it in terms of systemic issues, you want to try to rectify those issues because they might affect, it can affect one child, but it might affect many. So that's just one avenue. You can see who decides. It's different in every one: state agency officials, an impartial hearing officer. And then with a facilitation or mediation, it's the actual parties involved. So you have more of a voice at the table. There's federal timelines for all. It doesn't have to be 14 days or less, but we act really quickly. I mean, when COVID first started last year, towards the end of May, we were doing quite a few the very next day because they just needed to happen. Sometimes these are urgent situations where you absolutely have to have a meeting, just to keep a child in a current placement, something like that. Financial cost, state complaints, there's no cost to parents, state agencies, or LEAs. Due process hearing, no cost to parents unless they hire an attorney, and your odds of winning without an attorney are extremely low, a parent's odds. So that would be something they could get from any attorney they would call. I'll be glad to share that information because I've run the numbers. It hardly ever happens. So it can be very expensive, but the actual process itself, no filing fees, I think is what this graph is alluding to. And then for mediation or facilitation, no cost to parents or LEAs who request it. The financial cost state complaint, less expensive than due process hearings, that's for sure. Due process hearing can be very expensive. And I think I have a cost sheet in here that I've put in. And then of course, we talked about the grant funding available for mediation and facilitations. All right, mediation under IDEA. It may be requested at any time. I've said before, when I first started with the law school, it was only used when due process hearings were requested. So only at that time. And you can imagine, there had been mistrust, distrust, a lot of contention, sometimes for years up until that point. And then someone has filed a due process hearing. And only then was mediation offered. So it's really hard to get people in a room and try to build a relationship or keep it together at that point. It can be done, but it's usually small chunks. I mean, oftentimes we start with the whole premise of, will you just trust the process? Not even the person, just the process. So we're really talking about small baby steps. So the sooner you can use mediation when you come to an impasse, the better. It makes my job easier. Anyway, mediation agreement, it's a legally binding agreement and it's enforceable in any state or federal court. So that's important. So it's an actual contract. So you've got contractual obligations. An agreement is signed by both the parent and the representative of the lead agency who has the authority to bind. And a mediator will ask, are the parties in this room able to bind? Right? Because you just don't want to have someone in there, even though a para might be fantastic. And in some cases, they may be able to sign an agreement depending on what the specific needs are. But oftentimes you want to make sure there's a decision maker in there that can hold feet to the fire. Impartiality criteria for a mediator, they must be impartial. Changes optional procedure to offer, not require meeting to encourage mediation. And then a lead agency must select mediators on a random rotational or otherwise impartial bias. The law school does that because we've been contracted out to do that service. Mediation is voluntary and confidential. So what's said in mediation stays in mediation. It's considered settlement agreement for if you want to think about it in those terms. And it has to be a trained and impartial third party and mutually acceptable decision, right, to all parties. That's the goal. We talked about confidentiality, but if an agreement is reached, it's written, signed agreement, it specifies responsibilities of each party, and it becomes part of the student's file. So anyone that has a need to know and they're involved in the IFSP or IEP, they will have access to that agreement. So the product that comes out will not be confidential. There are some exceptions, and I know you might look at this and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe that wouldn't come up, but we do a lot of dependency neglect mediation, so it's important to always talk about the exceptions of confidentiality. They're a threat of harm to oneself or others, child abuse and neglect not previously reported, because if we're actually discussing child abuse or neglect, of course, if it's the subject matter, then we know about that one. We don't have to report that again. All parties are given written consent. Communication is already public, right? That's an exception to confidentiality. If you can get it any other way, and not use what you found out in the mediation outside of a mediation, but you can get it outside of the mediation, you can use it. And disclosure is required by statute. All right. Agreement, that's the big. It's legally binding and enforceable by any state court or federal court. And this is tricky because I'll tell you, probably a quarter of the mediations we do at the law school are contracts that have been agreed to previously and people just want to enforce them. And so they try it again in mediation to try to make it enforceable. Some would say that the SEA is responsible for helping enforce that. But I don't know. Oftentimes they have to take it to court if schools just aren't obliging by what they've agreed to. And I say schools because that's the cases that I've seen. All discussions remain confidential and cannot be used in subsequent due process hearing or federal lawsuit unless it could be gotten a different way, like we talked about before. What are the effects on due process rights? This is what you want to say about 150 times when you're talking to a parent, right? None. Mediation does not in any way deny or delay parents' rights to due process, nor do state complaints, nor do facilitated meetings. Parents may request impartial hearing at any time before, during, or after mediation. The guiding principles are honest communication and good faith effort. So, which you might be saying, man, that's gray. What I call a good faith effort might not be what they're calling a good faith effort, but courts have decided it's just a good faith effort. It might be that they actually come to the meeting and that's all they can do, and that's a good faith effort. But this mediation program is a little different than others that are court ordered. It's not court ordered, so it's completely voluntary. So usually by the time people agree to come, they're ready to work really hard and try to come up with an agreement. The goal is not to lay blame. We can discuss what has happened in the past and how we kind of got here, but mediation is future focused. And you'll hear a mediator say that over and over. Sometimes you have to let someone, if they're very upset, they've got a lot of history, they kind of have to roll around in the upset, right? Everyone does. You kind of have to do that so you can get it situated in your brain, and then you're ready to move forward about problem solving. And please remember, because this has come up in the past when I've talked to people and they're like, well, we don't agree on anything. We're not agreeing on everything. We need to agree. They're not understanding me. So understanding does not mean you agree, right? Understanding means you see where someone's coming from. You can appreciate where they're coming from. You understand where they are. That doesn't mean you necessarily agree. And you've got to be able to understand where they're coming from in order to do effective problem solving. All right, little thing in there, role of a mediator, right? To facilitate open communication, help the parties communicate, maintain integrity of the process. So many people will say, students especially, well, mediation facilitation, it's all the same. I go, it's very different. So when I go in as a mediator, my allegiance is to the process, not the parties. I am there to make sure that the process stays intact. I have fidelity. I have the process fidelity. When I'm a facilitator, my allegiance is to the group. I'm there to help them work better as a team. So they're completely different things from that angle. And we'll talk about legal differences as well. So I need to remain impartial, act as an agent of reality, right? Check in with them. Is this really going to work? Where do how would you feel if someone was asking you to do this? All of that. Sift through information, because a ton, you guys see this. Parents sometimes will share a lot of information at once. And you have to kind of sift through all the information they're telling you and get down to the court issues. And that helps people when you can help them identify like issues and group them. So I say that's my job kind of as a mediator or a facilitator, is sifting through a lot of information and then grouping. We've got to frame the discussion, right? So those different groups are going to put frames around them because it makes it easier to deal with and conquer one at a time. And then validate parties, because everyone needs to feel heard, and they need to feel understood. So just being able to validate those feelings, that's huge for parties, and they have to have that before they can move on. So just keep that in mind. And what's the goal of all of this is to empower the parties. And this is going to drive me crazy. So let me close this just a little bit. Sorry, guys. All right, perfect. There we go. Okay, can I trust that guy? Tell me about the mediator. Who are they? They may not be an employee of DHS or the Department of Education. Completely third-partied out here. We have professional facilitators and mediators. May not have professional or personal interests that create a conflict of interest or interfere with mediator's objectivity. So we actually send out who the mediator or facilitator will be well in advance, so everyone can do a conflict check. It's very important. They're trained professionals certified by the state of Arkansas in at least one area of mediation. Then they also must be knowledgeable per federal law. This is different than any other. I think contract mediation is the only other one. But in special education mediation, they must be knowledgeable about IDEA law, regulations regarding early intervention, special education, and related services. So most of them are attorneys, but not all of them. And the reason why they have to have this background knowledge is because they need to know how to frame questions and what questions to ask. That's the only point in that. They're not to give any legal advice or offer suggestions even. Sometimes that's crossing the line. And if we're ever like brainstorming, and you know how you can't get people to generate options, sometimes I'll say I'm going to completely step outside of my role and I'll try to throw some on the board just to get us started. But a mediator will always be upfront about that. This is not my role, but it looks like we're stuck. We're having some challenges here, just coming up with options. I'll throw some out and we'll get it going. So you might see them use that approach, but that's why they have to be knowledgeable. So here's your IDEA, some good law for you guys. In order to participate in this project, right, at Bowen School of Law, we require they be certified, like I said before, by the AADRC. So it's a group under the Supreme Court. It's listed on the AOC website, the Administrative Office of the Court's website. They must adhere to ethical practice of mediation. They have to observe at least one special ed mediation and co-mediate or co-facilitate one, and then do both on a pro bono basis, receive a minimum of 2 additional hours of continuing ed and special education issues as part of or in addition to the hours required from the ADR, which is also another 6, so that they can keep their certification up. And then also complete a 16-hour special education mediation training course. And attend additional training when deemed necessary. I send this out quite often to them about just different things that maybe Cadre is launching, or if Raven's group has something going on and she sends it to me, I'll make sure they know about it. Same thing with the ADE, right? Because the whole idea is to keep them up to speed. Any new case law, I usually do that, or Courtney Salas Ford at the ADE, if she's presenting something, just so we'll know exactly what's going on and keep up to date. Mediation is available for any student currently under the umbrella of special education or any student who has been denied. So later in life, when you get 504s involved and maybe you have a child with a 504 that they may or may not qualify for an IDEA, we can mediate that, right? Because that comes under that area. Mediation may be requested at any time. So we've probably warned you guys out on this, but anytime you can request mediation. An FIEP meeting or a FSIEP can be requested at any meeting where the parties feel a third party neutral may be advantageous. In 8-9 years of doing this, I've had maybe 2 early intervention total. It just doesn't, we don't see the issues there. And there are a couple of different reasons. Number one, they work so well with families. And number 2, you're dealing with providers. There's just great communication. I don't want to say that falls apart because we might have other people on the phone, but they will be the first ones, I think, in mainstream education from K on to say it gets tougher and tougher the more people you put on board a school. At first, you're dealing with 1 teacher, then you're dealing with 5, then sometimes you're dealing with 7 and 8. And it just gets more difficult. We'll talk about how to keep that intact for your kiddos that you're serving now, because you play a critical role in this. You can get forms from right off of our website, or a lot of people just call and we'll actually send them a secure link so they can upload IEPs, IFSPs, all that good stuff. Regarding due process, so this is kind of our processes for coming in. A lot of professionals like to know about this because they'd like to know what we're doing. So a conflict interest check is performed. So any client that comes in, because I guess I should tell you this. And so we have a law school, right, in Little Rock. There's a couple of law schools in the state. In Little Rock, we have a huge clinical experience. So within our law school, we have a clinic. Within that clinic, we have different law firms. Mediation is considered one law firm. We also have litigation. We've got some consumer protection clinics, some Delta clinics. So we have to check and make sure we haven't served that client in another capacity. So we do a conflict check. Then we come up with different dates where the parties can both meet, right? We schedule them usually within 14 days, but like I said before, since COVID, we've been doing this very quickly within 1 or 2 days. So it's we've all been kind of hot on our heels trying to put these cases together very quickly. When the date and time has been selected, right, all parties involved, a mediator is contacted by the mediation clinic. And usually we try to give them 2 or 3 dates just because we're currently loading up all of our mediators online. So you're able to choose, because I think that's going to help a lot with people so they can decide before. So I'm not, doing it on a rotational basis and trying to decide who's going to be the best fit. The date of the mediation is recorded in our calendar. And then because ASIMP, the Arkansas Special Education Mediation Project and Early Interventions, based at the law school, the clinic students are allowed to observe. So we usually keep that down to 2, and I will always touch base with you to make sure that's a good fit and a family's comfortable with that. We actually put out an at-a-glance, which includes the date, time, location of the mediation, a list of all the expected participants, name of the mediator, any co-mediator, observers, anything. We also give them the language regarding privacy and confidentiality. And we've got a couple of different videos we can send them that Cadre has released, the Center for Appropriate Dispute Resolution, to get them ready for how to prepare. And then also, if I've said it once, I've said it a million times, we actually have formed emails that go out to parents when they apply that say, here's Centers for Exceptional Families. This is your contact there. So I'm sorry, centers, but it's just important. I think that people feel empowered when they have someone helping them understand what to expect, what it's going to be like. Through education, we get a lot of equality and empowerment. So I usually overload them, but I want them to have what I've got. Case documents are available. Clio, we do it all online. We've got cloud-based management for everything. So we do the agreement to mediate where everyone signs, including the code of conduct, confidentiality, and that is important. So there are no recordings of a mediation. Nobody can tape a mediation. Any paperwork that comes into the mediation is destroyed. A memorandum of understanding will come out of a mediation. So that's your contract. Then the mediator will do an invoice. We also do an evaluation at the time so that we can get feedback on how that process was. And then we also do, we do a follow-up afterwards. So when we're training our mediators to get them ready to do these cases, we make it clear that I'm not that sold on how many people have an agreement. That is really not important to me. I don't want that to be a goal of any mediator or facilitator. What I do want to be a goal, if they're able to come up with an agreement, and over 90% of the time they are, it's over 85% of the time, that it's an agreement that works for the parties. That's the important thing. The only way you know that is if you do follow up, right? So you want to make sure that you're actually sending information to the party. Sometimes we do it 2 weeks, sometimes 90 days. It just depends on the situation. We want to follow up and make sure that agreement is still working for them. And that also gives us a chance to identify whether parents want to go forward if they feel have they filed a state complaint between the time we met and when they're receiving this notice? Did they have to file due process? A hearing? Are they pleased? Do they think communications improved? And then we use this to kind of tweak our program. And that's actually one of the ways we came up with facilitation. So we actually look at all this. So you guys give feedback if you're ever a part of this. And parents are always responsible for notifying their guests or schools. We deal only with one person, the LEA, in both spots. Once the mediation is complete, we have written agreements. Every person that signed gets an agreement, right? And then, like I said, we do I didn't talk about this, the self-evaluation form. So the students are in there evaluating the mediators. They're pretty comfortable with it. I haven't ever heard anyone say, oh, I didn't like that feedback. I mean, that's truly, this is how we work and how we get better at what we do. It's funny too, because when I go back and read the evaluations, I thought, yeah, I don't really care about some of them, but when they say I didn't feel heard or something, that's a trigger for me. I know that I need to focus more on that. So that's how we get better. But all mediators do a self-evaluation form after everyone. It helps them also think about maybe subject areas that they wish they knew more about, that we can kind of beef up our knowledge on, or it can also help a state agency. And we redact the information and we share it with the Department of Ed, and I'd be glad to share it with First Connections if we ever did any. But so we redact the information and we share it with them because it's a way they can say, oh, we have an area of the state that's we're having some issues with. We can go in and do a training, right? So it's to help everyone. But if we're having the same issue come out of one part of Arkansas or with the same LEA or something like that, it might just be a lack of knowledge. It often is. So you can go in and get an opportunity to educate. That's what that's all used for. So we talked about the after mediation, what happens, and a follow-up date for evaluation purposes. As you can see, sometimes it's 90 days, but oftentimes with the littles, which I lovingly call them, not your age group, but that 3 to 5 and up, we have to do it much quicker. So we really need to know if like a behavior plan was put in place, if that's working well for them. And we'll usually know that within a week or two, right? And you want to just try to keep that communication open. And I'll get on my high horse in a little bit about behavior plans and how important they are. But responsibilities of all participants, you got to participate and provide input. express your wants, identify your needs. So one way advocates are crucial in this process is helping a parent identify strengths, helping a parent identify what they want and what the needs are of their child, right? And create some distance between that parent and child relationship a little bit so that they can help learn to advocate. Assist in informational development, identify issues, potential solutions. And then you want to think of these case plans thinking long term, not just, man, the mom is driving me nuts. I want to put together some kind of criteria where we can identify that she's not only supposed to email me twice a week and that's going to happen tomorrow. Okay, so what's that going to look like a month from then, 6 months from now, even 5 years from now? So you're always thinking long term with vision and up ahead. So I understand. And the cool thing about special ed is you really can see it work the next day. So it's completely gratifying. It's why I love this work. But I think to get people off of that position, and a lot of times they're angry and they're digging into one thing, but to think long term, if you could have the best scenario, the best relationship with this family, what would it look like? And how do we work towards that? And that'll create a whole different vision and a plan for you. So to prepare, you got to have the appropriate documents, right? So advocates are really good. Providers are really good about having this, even helping parents provide. I can't tell you how many times I talked to the school, just did a facilitation recently, and they had the IEP plan in place, a draft, but hadn't shared it in advance. So everyone is reading right there at the time, and we're doing all this via Zoom right now. And I thought, this is just so unfortunate because I could feel it on the Zoom. I thought the parent's going to go, oh yeah, I'm reading. You don't really know that they're reading. You don't really know that they're processing. They're going to come back and go, now I had time to read and think about this, and I have some other questions. Wouldn't it be phenomenal if we shared that in advance? And I know it makes you guys really uncomfortable because you want to be there to explain the evaluations. I get all of that. But some of your families are able to look at those evaluations and think, I am a person that needs time to think. Right? If someone presents something, I'm like, everybody be quiet for a second. I need to read and process and write down questions. So I urge you, if there's anything you can share with your families in advance, do that. And then you have a productive meeting where you've got full voices at the table. And there's nothing more empowering than that, guys. Write out your questions. Encourage people to write out their questions. Hey, here's an idea. Share the questions you're going to ask the parents with the parents. I tell the parents that parents share the questions you're going to want the school to answer before you get there. It's not a, hey, gotcha moment. That's not productive, right? That's only on TV. That is not helpful in meetings ever. People need time to prepare. And then I always ask people, remain open to ideas that are different from yours, right? If you're coming in going, by gosh, we're going to do this, that's a negotiation, not a mediation. So you need to bring your negotiation skills, but you've got to be open to different ideas. And that's how you're going to get the best thing, the best bang for your buck. And you're not even paying. So there you go. A little bit more prepared, put aside your personality conflicts. I always like it when I put that. I used to say black and white, but okay, orange and white, whatever. Like, it's so easy to do. I know it's hard. I am a strong type A personality. I do get it. But we all have these skills where we breathe a little bit and we think, let me keep the eye on the pie. Let's think about the child first. And there are certain things that you can do through that meeting, right, where you're thinking about the child the entire time, and it takes away that sting from the other person. So think of what you want. What do you want out of this mediation? What do you want from the other party? The other party wants from the mediation. What do they want? What does the other party want from you? And what are you willing to do? All right, attends early intervention, parents and guardians, right? That's a must. Service providers, early intervention program personnel involved with the child. Anybody and everybody that helps make decisions about that child. And by golly, if you're going to don't ever, ever, ever sign somebody up to do something if they're not in that room, right? If Granny's the one that brings the child somewhere, Granny needs to be in the room. Okay, because I know that's hard for everyone, and people think, well, less is easier. Less might be easier right then, but it's not after that agreement's made. That's what tears agreements apart when they leave a room. Someone from DDS with decision-making authority if they're needed. So a mediator will always ask, are the parties here that can make decisions and make this happen? If you don't have them there, it can talk and stuff, but you really need that decision maker there. Parents may be accompanied by support persons. I always tell a parent, I understand that you're a strong advocate. I understand, even anybody I talk to, I have attorneys that are parents, right, that we serve. And I go, that's great. It's impossible to think about your child, advocate for them, listen, take notes, come up with questions all at the same time. It's just impossible. Especially oftentimes it feels like you got 10 people on one side of the room and a parent's by themselves on another. It's just not comfortable. Attorneys may not attend. Arkansas is the only state in the United States where attorneys may not attend any special education mediation. And I always put at the bottom, the more the merrier, right? Think about who serves that child and what you're going to be discussing and get them in the room. If they can't be in the room, call them on the phone for that part. Parents, guardians, teachers, and other interested persons, right? So this is your 3 through 5 through 12, really. It's all of that. Someone with decision-making authority, they got to be there, the LEA. We don't even, they're part of that IEP team. They just need to be there. Parents may be accompanied by support persons. Attorneys may not attend again. All right. And in most cases, in most states, 85%, we're pretty proud of this. It's 90%. And I do think most of it is high quality mediators. They're highly trained facilitators, and it's program fidelity. So we kind of preach this at the law school. We talk about it all the time. Almost all the mediators and facilitators that we use, they're involved in the law school. You know, they like teaching. So it's part of that program that helps it, I think, stay high quality. And I'm always welcome to y'all's feedback. So and people are pretty open with it. You know, I've talked to Shelby quite a few times about different people. She'll say, I don't know that went well. And I'm like, hey, we need that. You know, that's how we get better. So the difference between the two, right, between facilitation and mediation, facilitation, the objective is to improve the process for development. The other is to help the parties negotiate a resolution to a defined dispute. Okay, there's a difference there. Timing, intervene when parties realize the discussion will be difficult, and it's before big dispute is identified. Usually mediation, it's intervention after parties have conflict. The method, entire group stays together. So the other way, a lot of people, almost all the time, you'll caucus out, which is another private meeting. So you're in the middle of a mediation, you'll ask for a caucus. Any party can, that's explained up front, and it has an extra layer of confidentiality on top of it. It's really an opportunity to play the angel of reality, agent of reality, to go, hey, is this really going to work? What are you after? What are you know, what's going on? And then you come back to the group and decide who wants to share what, if anything. The role of the neutrals to help with the meeting process. So my allegiance is to the group. Over on mediation, it's problem solving, and I'm focused completely on that process. Outcome is developed or it's not, right? That's your outcome. The outcome of a mediation is a contract. And the reason why I have to explain the two of these, because we have different laws that apply. As you'll see on if it's not here, it's on the next page. Attorneys can attend any meeting they want. They cannot attend mediation, right? So we need to know what it is there. Also, I think at the beginning, our mediators were really comfortable with coming up with contracts and attaching them to IEPs, IFSPs. The problem with that is that it's better if it's in the IFSP or IEP. So then you know it's together, right? It's one document. So that's why we try to make a black line rule right down the middle. One's agenda driven and one's issue driven. And the focus, you can look at this, it kind of puts it all into one. One's conflict prevention, the other's resolution. So you can see where it hits that point. 1.5 hours, because it takes a while for people to feel comfortable and to be able to share. And then 3 hours is a minimum for mediation. It just takes a while to roll around in those feelings, those hurt feelings is really what you're dealing with. Differences, similarities, more of the same, right? Required by law, not required by law. Attorneys may not attend for mediation. They can always attend facilitation. Focus on repairing relationships, opportunity to grow. Usually more complex under mediation. You know, if the parent calls me and is using cuss words and they go, and I want to effing, you know, facilitation, I go, okay, that might be great for mediation. You know, that's right. That's a key right there. I think you might want that. It sounds like there's some deep-seated hurt, fear, anger, you know, that's coming through. Let's go for a mediation. And there are several times, y'all, where we'll do a mediation first, and then we'll go into a facilitation. Sometimes we break it up on different days. Sometimes it's after lunch. This is a slide that I created that I love. I don't know, it just made sense to me because I think about cooperation as like a drive to work, right? Not really, it's informal. You don't really have to dig in and you're not planning on marrying somebody there, right? You just have to get from point A to point B. Separate goals, resources, structures. You just have to share a little information, like who's going to grow in front of who on the lane. That's it. Coordination, right? You guys work in these too. You have some relationships that are cooperative, some that you're just coordinating, longer term effort, right? Some planning and division of roles, and some shared resources, rewards, and risk. And I just thought about something, and it would be interesting to see. I think schools work more on coordination because there's so many different members, but when it's magic, and what I really see with like early intervention, it's collaboration. It's ongoing, durable relationships working together, commitment to common goals. Everybody has common goals that they're sharing. It just works better. All partners contribute resources and share rewards, right? You can see when it really works, it works. So we're all shooting for that collaboration all the way through for children. All right, why would I do this? Well, it can help preserve the relationship, can happen at any time during the relationship. An outside party does not boss you around. They do not tell you what you have to do. That's important. It's very freeing and empowering. You can talk about anything. You can talk about how you don't like the tone of emails. You can't bring that up in a due process hearing. You can talk about how you feel disrespected when you're supposed to be at someone's home and they're continuously late, or, you know what I mean? Whatever it is, you get to talk about that type of thing and get it off your chest and come up with a better way of doing it. Due process hearings, they're not going to hear that. I mean, they just can't. They're there for legal issues only. And people always tend to keep agreements that they create, right? So I have a 15-year-old, talk about her a lot. She got this little cell phone thing. So she wanted us to come up with some rules. And I know this, like I do this for a living. So I came up with some rules. Well, what did she do? She broke it. So she's furious right now because I said, well, we got the cell phone over here. Let me know when you have a chance and we'll sit down together and come up with some rules. Well, I don't want to do that. I'm a child. I just want you to do the rules for me. Well, we tried that. It doesn't work. Right? So we want you to dive in and you to come up with these. She is furious about this. And I was laughing with my husband. I said, you know, it's so funny. Like if we could tell a therapist, like, yes, our child is really upset because we're asking her to sit down with us and come up with something that really works for us all. You know, it's just funny, but I thought it's easier to be told what to do, but it's not. You've got to have people's buy-in and input, and then the magic happens from there. List the things that you most agree on, right? When you get ready, list 2 realistic solutions that would work for you. Think about these in advance. The work is in the preparation for these meetings. If you were another person, would these solutions work for you? Why or why not? What are you willing to give? What do you need from the other person to give him what she wants? What do you want your relationship to look like 6 months from now? Think about it. All right, state complaint. One dispute resolution under IDEA, anyone may file a complaint to notify the lead agency of alleged violation, right? We talked about at the beginning, not more than 1 calendar year prior to the date of that complaint. Okay, for state complaint is sent to the state lead agency for resolution, DDS, and Department of Ed for preschool. It's most likely used in systemic issues is when I've seen it. And I really wish the ADE had a reporting measure for parents just to call and tell on people without being a state complaint, because I think sometimes that's just what they want. They just want to do. And so sometimes that's used as a state complaint for ADE purposes. And it's tough because it's expensive. They're sending out investigators. It takes a couple of weeks. It's very in-depth, and it needs to happen to keep us all right on our toes doing our best. But that's how I've seen it. Parent, program provider, or service provider, or any other entity filing the complaint may choose to resolve the issues, right, through informal meetings with the lead agency before filing the written complaint, the state complaint. And also there's a lot of people that file state complaints and then we mediate or have a facilitated meeting. If it comes to an agreement, right, then you need to make sure that that is put in writing so that you can report it back to these agencies and say, hey, we covered this. It's good to go. Here it is. State complaints must include certain information. Please tell your parents to be specific about this because they will be refused. I know that First Connections doesn't get many. ADE gets a ton, and they'll spit them back out if they haven't filled it out properly. And man, you really cannot make a parent any angrier, right, than them trying to fill out a state complaint, taking the time, and then the Department of Ed calling them back going, yeah, thanks for this. It's not good enough. Fill it out again. I know they use better words than that, but to a parent, that's basically what they're saying. They have to have facts that support the statement. They need to have the names right. They got to have DOBs, the date of birth, desired outcome that they would like, signatures. So I like transparency. I would have, if it was me, I'd have a state complaint printed out or paperwork and say, this is what it looks like. If you ever feel like you need to fill one out, let me know. You know what I mean? It's just like as an attorney, me giving the, the ethics commission number to my clients, right? It's like, no, let me know if I'm doing anything wrong. I'd like for you to give me a chance to correct it first. But yeah, this is what it looks like. And we just make sure when you're filling it out that you do it correctly. Like I said, there you go, the child's name and the address and description of the problem, including the facts. It has to be very specific. If it's about a service provider or program, it's got to include the name of the provider, right, in the program. If possible, the name of the specific service providers, right? They want to get nitty gritty here. They want to know what's going on, description of how that person or persons may have violated the child or family's rights under IDEA. If the issue raised in a formal state complaint are the subject of a current due process complaint, right, the investigation will be set aside until the due process hearing has been completed. If the issue or issues raised in a formal state complaint were the subject of a prior, so it already had a due process hearing, the hearing decision is final. Okay, and that then the complaint will not be addressed. All right, due process hearings, retained state option. This is the big, incorporates B and C. C regulations with modifications include option of 30 or 45 days. Under Part C, extension of the 30-day timeline can now be granted, also under B. And what I have seen most of the time is that this is done by the parent council, and it's done a lot lately when I've talked to the AD. So that's later on. You guys don't see it as much, but 3 to 5 and over you will. It irks me a little bit because the whole point of these admin hearings is to expedite the process for the benefit of the child to get their education. And so when this is delayed over and over again, and I understand some things happen, but if you're an attorney and you're double and triple booking and filing things on the same day, well, they're all going to be due on the same day. It doesn't take a rocket scientist. So if you have 4 cases and you're filing due process hearings on 4 cases in one day, they're all going to be due in 30 days. So I don't know if it's parent council just not thinking it through or what, but it doesn't serve their client really well if you're trying to get them back in school. So I know I'm preaching the choir. It's the wrong party. I don't have the parents council on here, but just think about that and help parents understand, I guess. It does require copies of transcripts, findings of facts, and decisions. You can read them if you want on the AD website. They're pretty entertaining sometimes. Lead agency has 15 days to schedule a resolution session after due process, right? If they don't conduct the resolution session within 15 days, the parent may request the hearing officer to begin the due process timelines. If the state agency wants to conduct a resolution session, and we actually can facilitate these at the law school or by the facilitators and mediators, the parent refuses to attend after 30 days, the school may request that the complaint be dropped altogether. Pretty important things to explain to a parent. Both parties may agree in writing to waive the resolution session. It is almost always waived. They figure by the point that they're filing due process hearing, they're ready to go forward. Here's the cost. Take a gander at this, and it's about 5 years old, so I need to update it. But you're talking about 135 bucks. That's what it costs in grant money. It's really free to you. Mediation, 300. A full state complaint investigation cost is 4,000. Attorney's fees for parents, about 19,000 is what's going to cost you. Outside counsel for schools, another 10. Settlement prior to the due process is going to cost about 24,000. Verdict cost could be about 15, right? You can't even get that there. You got to go and file it again in a proper court to be able to get any attorney's fees there. Insurance deductible for a school, and then you've got other related costs, IEE, subs for teachers, et cetera. And like I said before, the damage that it does, I think, to relationships, parents, teachers, it's really hard on them. It's not easy. Some of these go on for days at a time. So if there's any opportunity to talk to someone, if you need to be the first one to reach out a hand and go, hey, things got off on the wrong foot. Let's talk about this. The sooner the better, because these things are just really hard. And I'm a lawyer saying that. I mean, I think there's a time and place for it, but a lot of these things could be agreed to. And I think it's interesting because the hearing officers now, I've talked to a few of them, and I've heard that a couple of them will get people in a room and go, you guys, can you do a facilitated IEP? I think that's what needs to be done. I'll give you 10 days to get that done and then come back to me. So they're thinking, y'all can make this work. Go make it work. You know what I mean? For the benefit of this child. So that's pretty forward thinking on their part. All right. I flew through there. Do we have questions? I have 8 minutes. So I feel pretty excited. Only one, huh? Yeah, it's 3:51, right? So I have 8 minutes. What did I say? I can't hear you. Okay, Raven, unmute yourself.
Rhonda said we scheduled 2 hours. At the very beginning, she put it in the chat, like, take your time.
Oh, I didn't see it. No, I didn't know. I thought it was 1 and 1. Did y'all hear me flying through here?
You put
Oh,
that.
girls, no, y'all gonna have to stop me way before then. Do we have questions? Rhonda, we gotta work it out.
Oh,
You're like, girl, I was chatting you. Okay. So
no, I think Katie actually put that in there, but
well, I want to go to this slide so y'all get the information, then I'll get off of this so we can maybe see people.
yeah, I think Donna said good information. I attended mediation training years ago. Thank you. Brittany Mitchell said thank you so much. You did a great job. Kate Berry wants to know how to get a copy of the slideshow.
I can email it to you. Does that sound, or do you have it? No, I can email it to you.
Yeah, email it to me, and then I have all of their information that I can email them. Clara Penny, who do we contact if we want mediation training?
Mediation training, what do you mean?
Clara.
Clara, can we unmute Clara?
Yeah, let me see if I can unmute Clara.
I need to change my view so I'm not just a big person on the screen.
There we go. Oh, did I, Clara?
Okay, now to be a mediator, because I'm retiring soon.
Ooh. Okay, to be a mediator, there's a couple of different classes. You can go to the AADRC website. I do everything via Google, so I wish I had some snazzy thing. I usually go to the Google search and put Arkansas Alternative Dispute Resolution.
Okay.
And it will take you to that AOC website. Here's some more acronyms I'm throwing out, right? The Administrative Office of the Courts. And they actually have a whole, as you can see, certified mediators. They have a whole list of different courses and classes. Jennifer Jones Taylor is the contact there. Yep.
Okay.
And that's your connection. So once you get those things done, give me a call and that'll be great. Yes. We need mediators and facilitators. I know, I mean, it's just, maybe we probably have 200 calls a year.
Mm-hmm.
I know. Well, say y'all have First Connections. You guys do everything right. It's like you have no idea. I know. Centers for Exceptional Families. If Shelby's on here, she'll probably be like, "Oh yeah." I don't know how many calls y'all field, but it's hundreds.
Well, we are a lot smaller, so it's not just that we're great. We are a teeny tiny program. So I mean, let's not make our Part B big sister feel bad. You know.
I know I'm not. Well, and they have a lot. I'm not. You're right. You're right. They deal with hundreds of thousands of children. I mean, absolutely. There's a lot going on.
And after we've taught parents their right to complain, they get really good at it by the time the kid's older.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely right. But I think it is important. It's empowering. And guys, it's hard to be on this end. I'm sure centers will say the same. When you have a parent with a child in school and they call and they're nervous to talk to you, usually the first thing they say is, I don't want to get anybody in trouble. Yeah. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're so different. Do you know what I mean? By the time I'm calling, I'm like, and you need to file it here. And but they don't want to do it. They feel like they're causing problems. And I always try to say, you're doing what you're supposed to do. You're an advocate. You got to have a starting place. And the worst calls to get are when they're in 11th grade, right? And nothing's been put together for them. They've just they're not reading, and some different things are happening, and those are awful. So that you can do it early on, we're better off.
Yeah. So I've noticed a bunch of people in the chat asking about getting a copy of the slides, but I know that Rhonda is recording this. So Rhonda, this is going to be linked up on the TCFEF page, right?
Yes. Well, yeah, we'll put it on our website. Yeah.
Yeah. So that would probably be the best way for everybody to access it too. And maybe we can send a link out.
Yeah.
To the recorded version. That'd be so much easier.
Yeah. No, we can do that. Or I have the list right here of everybody who wanted them. So we'll figure that out. Whatever's easier. So
awesome. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Tiffany. You Just,
Well, I've got a couple more if you want me to. I'm reading the chat, so I feel like I'm very
Oh.
advanced. Are there any regulations on advocates? Absolutely not. So we talked about that maybe, and it's, you know, how you have this list of things to do. So Shelby and I were talking about getting together to create some kind of at least training, you know what I mean, where we can use the law school or wherever, everybody involved, because it does take it takes a tribe to kind of pull all this together. And then I feel like we were starting all of that and then COVID hit, and I mean, it's really just been trying to patch it together. I think that's taken it. So, and we're now seeing at this point, at first we were looking at how to get IEPs together for the kiddos at the end of May, right? So the March, April, May, and now it's hitting that we really need some distant learning plans. You know, so what this looks like, trying to do it all remote, is it's really hard. So I don't know of any regs. Other states do have them, but in other states also, your advocates that you have available or the parents have available to that here are free. And a lot of states you actually have to pay by the hour. It's almost like hiring an attorney. And in a lot of states, like in Virginia, advocates work for law firms. So I hope we never go that route here, because you know, we have a really poor state and people should be able to have access to dispute resolution without it, you know, costing them an arm and a leg. I'm trying to think, is there anything else? So we did mediation training. We talked about that. Y'all are welcome. I just wish, yes, the cost sheet's so expensive, right? And that is a drop in the bucket. Because I talked to Courtney South Fork, because I said, I want to see what the settlement figures are, you know, which is really hard because when they settle, you don't really see that at all, right? I mean, that's probably the number one reason why you've got resolution meetings sometimes, that they have to go to due process to be able to get attorney's fees. There's no other way to get them here. So I would like to see some of those amounts, because we should consider that. So I had to pull the amounts from other states when I put that together. Anything else? I don't want to drag it on. I just want to be able to answer any questions while we have the time. I didn't realize it was 2 hours, but look how happy I'm excited. No, you are fun to hang out with. It's either this or teenagers.
I mean, we could stay on another hour.
Exactly.
But now my teenagers are home.
Mine are too. That's what. Oh yeah. So you're there. My teenagers are right out this door. When I'm printing, that's like I'm like locked in here, going, stay away.
I know they just walk by, and I'm like, and they know when they hear people talking, they know just to keep on walking.
Yeah, I put sign on the door. Mom's on call.
Well,
so
doesn't look like there are any more questions.
I would like to make one plea. And if Shelby's not on to make the plea, I'll make the plea, because she made the plea to parents. I'll make it to professionals. One of the best things you can do for these kiddos, right, before they transition, is to, I don't know, that transition meeting, if you need it facilitated, whatever, make sure everything's in writing. I mean, it's just, that's how you can help these kids transition to school. Yeah. And I would beg you to do that. We see more mediations in kindergarten, then in middle school, and then at the end of high school. So that tells me a couple of things, that kids are having a really hard time in kindergarten, right? For a long time, they were being kicked out right and left. And I understand it. There's a lot of pressure on teachers. I'm not laying blame on one or the other. There's just a lot of things happening. You know, a lot of kids in the room that are just learning some skills. And then, you know, there's a whole burden on them to be able to read, right? And we're doing standardized testing in kindergarten, and they can't even read the stuff. So we actually put it in the headphones to test them. So we could go on our little, how about this stuff is completely inappropriate and crazy, but we won't. We just have to deal with it, but making sure that they have what they need, the accommodations they need for that type of testing. It's critical for their success. We've got to help push a love for learning in these little guys. Right? Because I did read something the other day, or it's a famous quote. It said, nobody drops out. You know, you don't decide to drop out of school when you're 17. You decide when you're in first grade and you wait. Yeah. And that's the damn truth, people. Do you know what I mean? Like, they've had a lifetime of disgust and disappointment and feeling like a system is working against them. So the best thing we can do for these kids is to help them realize how awesome they are and bring them into the meetings. Right? I mean, it kills me, because every time I talk to a parent, I'm like, they're kindergarten, they're not too young to write invitations. They're not too young to decide who comes to wrap around them at that time. They're not too young to do a video. They're not too young to come in for 5 minutes. And then let's hope that they can lead that meeting by middle school, right? And then if they want to go on to higher education, then they are advocating for themselves and telling teachers in high school what their needs are. That's what we need to do for kids.
Exactly.
Preach. Anything else?
Awesome. Well, it doesn't look like we have any more questions. I want to thank you so much, and Raven, First Connections, for partnering with the Center for Exceptional Families, and hopefully we can get together more often.
That sounds great. Thank you all for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much. I'll
Bye-bye.
talk to y'all soon. Bye.